quite bluntly, is about as useful as an ashtray in a motorbike, because it won't solve anything. As Dougie was alluding there, it could well be a situation that the extremes, the Democratic Unionist Party and Sinn Féin, on the other hand, they come back with a slightly bigger mandate and the middle ground gets squeezed. And basically, we go back to year zero. In other words, nothing happening. The big thing that has to be understood, that there is a need to combat the crisis in the living cost of living. We need a devolved government. However, the Westminster administration and the Brussels bureaucrats, they've got to get together and make up their minds which is the more important, saving the peace process or saving the protocol. Getting rid of the protocol would be the obvious solution. Now, whether you cut the head of the snake straight away and we have a miracle by midnight tonight, I can't see that happening, or whether you get rid of the protocol by what you might call death by 1,000 cuts, that might be, after a future election, something that could lure the DUP back into Stormont. But the one thing that will have to be resolved, as Dougie alluded to, we've got to get rid of this protocol. It is the big bugbear that is holding up democracy, because that's what's really at stake here in Northern Ireland, democracy and the peace process. Because the last thing that we want to happen is for the entire Stormont executive and everything to totally collapse, the big building on the hill to be shut completely, and there's the danger that the loyalist hard men may say to democratic parties of whatever shade, you've had your turn at having a go to get rid of the protocol, now it's our turn, and we go back to street violence. On a political front, I've got to add in as well, the big danger for unionism is that if there is no Stormont whatsoever, it may not be direct rule which the Sunak administration gives us. It may be some form of joint authority in which Dublin has a say in the running of Northern Ireland. A bit like in 1985, after the Anglo-Irish Agreement. And Dougie may remember the Ulster Says No protests, the Ulster Still Says No protests. They didn't get rid of Dublin's involvement via the so-called Maryfield Secretariat at Belfast. This is a very critical time for unionism. In fact, it's a very critical time for the future of the peace process here in Northern Ireland.
It's a really, really stark prognosis when you put it like that violence could return if this is not sorted out. Might it therefore, in the most optimistic frame of mind, and there isn't much optimism in this situation at all, might another election, therefore focus the minds of the European Union, showing them completely that if the protocol continues as it is, there will be no democracy, there will be no assembly? Oh, I'm afraid Dr. John Coulter seems to have dropped off there. We'll see if we can re-establish his signal. But before that... no, I believe we do have Dr. John Coulter back. I hope you could hear me through that question. Might this focus the European Union's mind?
I think the only thing that will focus the European Union's mind is for the Sunak administration to take a hard line against the protocol. Basically, they've got to implement as a start Article 16. That's a beginning of the dismantling of the protocol. Now, I know that the protocol is perhaps set in legislation from that aspect of things, but what we're looking at here is a process of getting rid of the protocol that gets the Democratic Unionist Party on board and gives them the hope that they can go back into Stormont, irrespective of whether they finish in this expected future election ahead of Sinn Féin or behind Sinn Féin. The key aspect must be the dismantling, whether by, as I said earlier, cutting the head of the snake or death by 1,000 cuts. The protocol has got to be resolved.